So we're going to take a look at screen design today. And unfortunately, I have to mix screen design with a little bit of scripting, and I'd rather do scripting in a separate session. So those of you who are watching this video will have to go on faith on a bit of the scripting. Let's design something for the screen, and as you can see, the screen's already about as busy as I want it to be. I keep trying to reduce the clutter. Let's take a look at the panel. These panels zoom out to give me information, and I can have multi-page panels. So let's invent a multi-page panel so that you can see how things work. I'm going to go up to Configuration and to Screen Tools. So missed it. Screen Tools, and there's a selection here, New, Destroy Screen. And when you select it, your screen will disappear. Everything except the bitmap, because quite often I want to reuse the same bitmap. However, if you check Edit Mode and go into the editing mode, your right button context menu will appear, and in here we can select Change Bitmap. And if you select Change Bitmap and hit Cancel, your bitmap will disappear and you're starting with a brand new fresh screen. Now, I'm sure almost everybody watching this video is either a programmer or have tried programming at one time or another, so you've made a Hello World application. In the context of screen design, let's instead make a calculator or something that you can use. And a calculator is something that's maybe not intuitive to somebody who hasn't programmed, and it's a fairly easy construct. So let's try making one of those to add into Augie's front panel to see how difficult that would be. Now, we've already entered edit mode, so we have a right-click menu where we can add several different types of items. Calculator is going to need a DRO, so let's add one on. Now we're going to make a panel screen on this one. So in a panel screen, one of the rules is you want to make it pretty big. It will shrink down in the panels, so this gives you the opportunity to create something that's not too cluttered, and you can use very large items so that you can get a good handle on what's going on. Let's select properties for this DRO, and we'll give it a help tip, even though most people would know what it is, and we'll just call it your results. This is something that happens if you float your mouse over a control. You're going to get a help tip with a brief explanation of what's going on. And let's give this DRO a variable name. Just by typing a word here, you create a variable that the entire system will recognize. So you could say, you could type Diefenbaker. It doesn't make any difference what the word is. In this case, let's call it calc DRO, and I'm going to use capital letters just so I recognize it when I see it as a variable name that I've created, because there are system variables as well that are in mixed caps. For number style, I'm going to go with text, because I find the text looks cleaner. We'll stick with say 10 digits and 4 decimal places. We're going to make a very simple DRO actually. Let's get rid of the decimal places altogether for now. I'll leave it as an exercise to you to make a calculator with decimal places. For a DRO, that's really all that we need to add. So we've created a system variable called calc_DRO, which is a DRO. Now, any DRO, by virtue of the fact that you placed it, you'll be able to enter data into it by typing in. And you'll be able to access the data, either through variable or script. Since we've given it a variable name, we'll connect this with global variables when we deal with it. But let's add some buttons for our calculator. Now, we're going to want to have 10 buttons, numbers 0 through 10, but we don't want to create them individually. That would be a pain in the arse. So let's do the properties of a single button first. First of all, we don't want it to be a toggle button. Toggle buttons go on when you push them and off when you push them a second time. If it's not a toggle button, it's a momentary button, so it's on-off when you push it, and that's what we want for a calculator. We'll turn off the LED indicator, which would normally indicate the state, a 0 or a 1. For help text, I don't think anybody's moronic enough to need an explanation that that's the number 1 button, so we'll leave that alone. The text, of course, will have to be changed from empty. Let's just change it to a number 1. Colors are fine. We won't worry right now about border shapes and all that kind of stuff. I leave that as an exercise to you. So here we have a number 1 button. Now that we've got a button that looks kind of like what we want, it's easier to just simply copy it, and then we can paste it. And now we have 2 buttons. And let's go one more, and there's our 3. Now, if I hold down my control key, I can click them one at a time and get all three. So I can then say align top, and I can even space evenly horizontally, and they'll shift around. So now I'm going to select the three of them by holding my control key down as I get them and say copy items, paste, and I'll paste three more. And then I'll give it three more. So now we have 9 buttons up. Let's just grab one, copy that, and paste it. Okay, now obviously we don't want a calculator with the numbers 1 through 1. So we're going to right click on one and select properties, and we'll get a floating properties dialog. Now, when you drop objects on the screen, if they're not variabilized, that is, we refer to this DRO as a variable calc DRO. But if we're not going to refer to them as variables, and there's no sense giving variable names to buttons on a calculator, we're going to call them by ID. So this will be ID button number 1. Let's call this button number 2, and so on, until we get all three numbered 1 through 9. Okay, so I have numbered these 0 and 1 through 9. It doesn't have to correspond with the button. This is just a way that we can identify the buttons. Now we can change the numbers on all these, of course, on their text. So the button text of this one would be a button for number 2. You don't have to do a lot. You can just change an entry if you're on a button, and then just click on the next button the entry will take. You don't have to worry about pressing enter and all that kind of stuff. So we'll go 4, 5. Okay, so now I have changed them all so that it looks kind of like a calculator. And I'm going to click them all. I should have a drag box really just around them. I'm going to click them all and kind of center them up on the screen, although it won't matter. OLD will take care of centering them later. We probably don't need a DRO that big, so let's drag the DRO over here and put it here. Now we're going to need a couple buttons for, say, multiply, divide, and so on. So I'm just going to copy this number 1 button and stick it over here, paste it right there, and let's differentiate it from the rest by making it, say, a round button. So instead of rectangle, we'll select circle, and we'll change the text on it to white colored text, and instead of the number 1, we'll give it an X. For multiply, and we need to give it an ID number, and we know 0 through 9 are used, so let's give it an ID number of 10. They don't need to be in order or anything else. Again, it's just identification. You could put that as 6,123. It won't make any difference. Okay, so that's ID number 10. Now we're going to copy it and paste it. Oh, now I got the wrong one there when I copied, so you can just simply delete that and then redo the copy and paste. That's better. Now this one down here, let's make this an equal button, and let's change it into an ellipse just to differentiate it from what we're doing. Now ellipsis and so on, you can drag to any size you want. Any button can be dragged to any particular size. Okay. So there's the start of a calculator. All you need is a bit of logic to tie that all together and to begin to add it to a screen. So the first thing you want to do, though, is to save it, because saving it and reloading it will reset all their naming variables and conventions so that everything is recognized. So here I'm going to select Save As Panel under the Screen Tools, and it will direct us to the panel directory, and I'm going to call this calc panel .panel. I already had one, but we'll replace it. Okay, so this is what we have so far, and we're going to bring up our scripter. Turn off the edit mode. Now, once edit mode is off, you can see that you can enter any number that you want into this DRO. The buttons and so on won't do anything. They all do a nice flashy dance when you go over them, but they don't do anything. The scripter is where you will control your screens and debug other functions as well, but there is only one library turned on at the moment in the program, and that library is meant for scripts that are going to take care of the screen. So we turn on our scripter with this power button on the side, and once you power it up, things happen like global functions all display here so that you can loop through them to see how to program and so on. And again, we're going to go into this in much detail when we do scripting, so you're going to have to go a bit on faith, as this is more about screen design, but this will be a brief introduction to you on scripting. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my library, and I'm shown information showing what's on my screen. First of all, every screen will have a main screen script. This script is called whenever the system loads this screen, whether it's a panel or a screen or what, it will call any script on main screen. The fact that the text is black tells you there's no script there at the moment. Now if we open up main screen, you can see we have a list of controls, and they're wrong. The first one is main but1, but the rest are a bug. They should have names on them. So the system has not initialized this screen properly. Do not program such a screen. I'll probably have it fixed by the time you deal with it much. But the only thing we need to do is reload that screen for it to work. So we'll just go to Screen Tools and say Load Panel. And then we'll select our Calc Panel.Panel. And now it's reloaded the system. Reloaded that screen, and we should be okay. Again, we'll turn on our debugger and look at our scripts, and you can see now that they're all properly named. You set the IDs, this 1 through 0, and then I've got two 10s. I must have set both of these buttons to 10. So the first thing we're going to do is fix that, because we really don't want to deal with it. And whenever you want to edit, get out of your scripter so that you're on your edit screen. So I'm going to go to the edit mode. I will eventually put a warning so that you'll know not to do that. This is number 10. We're going to move it to 11. And you can just type a number. And yeah, that one was 10, this one's 11. So now that we've done that, we will save that panel again. I could have selected just save, it knows now, but for whatever reason I selected save as. Okay, now we're going to go back to our scripter. Must turn off edit mode first. Go back to our scripter. Turn on our debugger. And if we look at our main screen now, we should see that we now have buttons 1 through 0, which match those, and then main button 10 and 11. 10 is the multiply, 11 is that one. The DRO, you'll notice, doesn't show up. That's because it's a variable. It's now a global variable because you gave it a name. And whatever name you typed into there is now global in the system whenever we're dealing with that. And down here on our list of globals, we'll probably see it. Can't promise it doesn't always show up right away until we use it, but calc button should be somewhere in our system variables. And there it is right there, calc DRO. So you can see calc DRO is now a system variable just because you put it on and named it calc DRO. So obviously with a calculator we want something to happen whenever we push these buttons, and as you can see now there really is nothing happening. But here in our screen script library, you can see that it knows what all the objects are, so we can tell it we want to create a script for main button 1, and to do that we just select main button 1 and we hit checkout. Now if we haven't put a help script into any of these objects, you can type one in this help text and it will go into that object's properties without you having to open up its properties and stuff. This is just like a double checker for you. Again, we'll go into all this in scripting, but we're just doing a light intro here. So I'm going to check out main button 1, and when I check it out, it knows there is none, so it creates one for us. So this is the instantiation of a function. It's global, it's a button, and it sends us a value called current. And current will be 1 when you push a button, 0 when you release it. In the case of a momentary button, you're going to get 2 calls, 1 when you push, 1 when you release. On a normal button, you'll get a 1 when you first push it, a 0 the next time you push it. So you'll only get 1 button per press. So what could we do with a button and a calculator in order to make it work like a calculator? Well, I guess the first thing we want to do is get the value that's currently in the display so that we can modify it because we've pushed a button. To declare a variable, just make one up. Let's call it number is equal to, and I'm going to type global get, and as I begin to type it, it fills in global get. And most things are English in this program, so you'll remember that we called that DRO, and if you forget, you can just right click and it says calc DRO. So global get quote calc DRO. Just like that. So once we get that number, we're going to want to modify its sum. And since they're pushing the 1 button, what you're going to want to do is say number is equal to, now I'm going to eventually auto indent for you, but at the moment you would type number is equal to number times 10 and then plus 1. And that's what you would want to put into that DRO. So let's do that. There's a, we'll say global set, and we give it the name calc DRO and the value, which is the new number variable we just declared. So this script would take whatever's in the display, multiply by 10. So if I was to push 1, it should go to 901. But we have momentary buttons. It's going to call this twice, once when we push it, once when we release it, and we don't want that. So what we're going to do is modify this routine by making sure that we ignore zeros. Zeros is when we release the button. A 1 is when we push it. Current is the value that comes in from this button. So what I'm going to say is if current is equal to double equal signs to compare two things and a single equal sign to assign a value to a variable. So if current is equal to 0, we must use a brace because we're in an if. Return, semicolon. And I'm going to space this out to make it look nicer. It'll run either way, of course, but if it's spaced out, that's so much the better. Okay, so now we've created a script for the number 1 button. We've entered the text that we figure will work. In order to test it, we want to push the play button. When we push play, down here in the bottom in the message thing, it'll say running program, thread 1 started and stopped, running thread, no compile errors detected. Now nothing happened. The DRO didn't change or anything, and that's because we didn't tell it to. What we did is we created a script. The process of running a global declaration is just simply declaring an object to the system. In this case, the object we're declaring is a function, and its name is main_but1. Well, what Augie does is when you push a button, it looks for a script by its name, and if it finds one, it will run it. So we ran the script, but again, it doesn't do anything. It just informs the system that this script exists. In order to run the script, we need to push the object that does it, and you'll notice when I pushed it, our display just went to 901. If I push it again, it'll go to 9,011. It is multiplying the value by 10 and adding 1. So now what we need to do is put that into each one of these buttons, only add a different number at the end. We can do that more easily by simply copying what's inside that, and then we check it in. And we do that by going to get another script or by pushing the button beside it, which is reset all interfaces. And it'll ask us, do you wish to check in the current bucket? Whatever you've checked out of the library goes into what we call the bucket. If you've modified a bucket and you're happy with it, you say, yes, I want to check that back into the library. And now in the library, you'll see that main_but1 is green. It has a script. The rest do not. They're just names. Let's check out button number 2. And I'm just going to paste that in there and say +2. And now you must run it. If you don't run it, you won't be able to store it back in the library. It wants to know that it compiles properly before it will check it in properly. So then we go to get another one. We say yes, check that in, and we'll go for number 3. Check it out, and we'll repeat this. Okay, so I've copied this script into every one of the buttons. Here's the final one, which is 0, where I just multiply by 10. So now if we start with 0 in the script, we can go 1, and each button we type multiplies by 10 and adds that number. Now you will run into a problem with this. Again, it's only a simple example, but if you keep typing letters, eventually it'll seem to go out of sync, and this is because you got too many numbers in the display. The number is so large that you've rolled over, so you would have to enter 0 to do it. However, it shows the process of doing something like making a calculator entry. But what about multiplying? How would we do something like that? Well, we would need a couple globals, I think, in order to do that. We need a global holding register and an operations indicator. So what the heck, let's do that. I'm going to check in that last button, and now I'm going to check out the main screen. You can see I don't have a script under main screen. Main screen scripts are run as a screen is loaded. So this will run as this panel opens up. It runs it, and it runs it only once, and it will never run it again as long as the context of the system stays the same. If you reset all the scripts, it will run it once again. So it's the perfect place to put globals. So I'm going to create a couple global values. Let's make one called holding ridge. A weird enough name that that somebody else won't use the same name. It's inevitably going to happen, but we'll just say for now to try to make your names unique to yourself. Otherwise, other people are going to have trouble running any globals that you have. It won't be such a problem when we do G-code commands because they're function names, and it should be fairly easy to keep track of function names. So we have a holding register, and that'll be the last number we typed, but we're going to need an operations register to tell us what the operation should be. So let's call it opreg for the heck of it, and let's make it a string. And just by typing, let's type none. Just by typing a string means I made that into a string register. It can be a string, an integer, a double, a boolean, whatever you like, but simply by assigning it, you create it. And we run it to make sure that it works. Oh, we don't have a bucket checked out, so we're going to lose that because you can't chuck in what you don't have checked out. So I'm going to copy that and then check out main screen. I don't know why it didn't check out before. I must have hit OK instead of check out. I should have known because I do send out a message to warn you. This is the global functions and declarations for main screen. Now this main screen isn't necessarily the main screen of your final screen. It means it's the main screen of whatever you're creating, in this case a panel. So anyway, I've run it. We now have two globals called holding reg and opreg. It's almost like declaring a DRO as a register, in this case calc DRO, but we're declaring them as global values to be able to be used by other buttons. So okay, we can check that back in, and now that's checked into the main screen. Now this button here was button 10, so let's go check that out. You will get redundant messages about checking things in. I will be killing those as well. I haven't spent a whole lot of time cleaning up the scripter yet. So we want button 10, which is our multiply button. So I'm going to check that out. Now the question is, what do we want to do when we're inside button 10? Well, first of all, we do not want the release of the button to do something. We only want it to happen when we push it. Now, you could make the argument that do it the other way and then you could drag your mouse off. So again, I leave that up to you, but in this case, let's say if current is equal to 0, brace return. And you must have a semicolon after the return, and then that line should work fairly well. If we hit, and I'm constantly hitting play just to make sure that I don't have a compile error. It's very easy to miss a semicolon and so on and so forth, but you get used to it fairly quick and you know what the syntax is, and that'll be getting better over time again as we add auto indenting and more highlighting on the global commands and so on. So when you push a multiply button, you really want to store the value that's in the register first. So let's do that. Now I can't recall off the top of my head, so I'm going to check that in and look at main screen again. And we want to remember that we want holding reg and opreg. And in order that my memory works properly, I'm just going to copy those and check that out. And I'm going to go back and grab our button 10 that we were working with. And I'm just going to temporarily paste those down there as a holding thing because my memory gets worse all the time. So we want to know what our last value was. So what we're going to do is we're going to say global holding reg is equal to, and then we're going to get it with global get. And it was calc DRO as I recall. And if you're ever in doubt, was it calc DRO, you can just right click and yes indeed it's calc DRO. So now I used the global word here because holding reg was declared global originally in the system, and as I explained earlier, if you type a word like humdinger is equal to 6, the word humdinger is now a variable, a local variable with the value of 6. So if you just typed holding reg is equal to global get, there's a good chance the system may think that that's a local variable. So by putting global in front of it, I now guarantee that this value is going to go into that holding reg that we created back on the main page. I can now get rid of that. So now we have a holding reg that is holding that value, but we also want to set what an operation would be. Well, when we push the equal button. So we're going to say opreg is equal to, quote, multiply. I can get rid of that now. So now what the system's going to do is when you hit the multiply button, it's going to get the value that's in the register and put it into holding register. It's going to store the fact that we want to do a multiplication. But we got one last thing to do is we should zero that display. So I'm going to copy that, which is very close to what the command is that we'll use to clear it. And we'll say global set instead of global get calc DRO, comma 0. So we're going to check to make sure that we're pushing the button, not releasing it. We're going to store the value of our global variable that we created called calc DRO. We're going to tell it we want to multiply. We're going to set that DRO to 0 and then get the heck out of that script. And that's really all you need to do for that. Then we need the equal button. Well, we know that that's button 11, so let's go check that out. And we'll go get number 11. It's the only one black at this point. Now again, here we don't want a release of the button to affect us. So we're going to say if current is equal to 0, brace return. You'll get used to using braces a lot. It's simply the separator for a scripter. Semicolons determine the end of a command or a line, and I don't need that last one I put on, but I'll often put it there just for safety's sake. Okay, so now this section of the code we're only going to reach when we initially push the equal button. So what are we going to do? We're going to say if, and now I've lost that function again. I think it was calcop is equal to multiply, and then we need a brace to tell it we're doing operations for the if. There's our closing brace. So if the calcop has multiply in it, then we simply want to make a variable. Let's call it number, or just to differentiate it, we'll call it answer is equal to holding reg times global get, and again we'll get our calc DRO. Now, just in case there is no op, we'll say answer is equal to 0 just to give the variable answer an initial value, and then underneath here we'll put global set calc DRO, comma answer. And I'm not so sure that that was holding reg, so I'll just check that out. But first, I'll just run this. There's no errors, so I'm free to check that in. I'll check it in, and I'll check out my main screen. And it is opreg, so I used something wrong there. Opreg, and it was holding reg. I'm going to have to put something so that I can remember those. So, we'll go back. Get number 11, check it out, and it was opreg, that's right. Opreg and holding reg times that. Okay, so now we can check out to see whether or not that works. I'm going to start the DRO at 0. This is one simple calculator. We got 23 times 2 equals, and we got an answer of 0. So obviously we messed up somewhere. So what would you do? Well, you can put a print statement in any one of your scripts. And here we can say print holding reg, just to see what that's doing. And let's also print our op reg for the heck of it, just so we can see what's going on. We run, and again, you don't expect anything when you run. So 3 times 2, and when we push equal, we get a couple prints. It says 3 and none. Well, opreg, it printed the holding register, which was 3, and then sure enough, that was the number that we had typed the second time. But we got none as our opreg. So what could be the problem? Well, let's go back to where opreg was set, back here in button 10. So again, I'll check that in. I'll grab button 10. Opreg is equal to multiply, but you notice what I didn't do. I didn't tell it that it's global. So it created a new variable called opreg and assigned multiply to it. But if I tell it that I want multiply to go in the global opreg, and then we check that in, 3 times 6, and we hit equals, we get 18. So now our calculator is working properly. It's one badass calculator. It can actually do calculations of multiplication. I leave it to you as an exercise for what else you could do with that kind of thing, because again, this is about screen design, and we're going to go much deeper into the scripting when we get to the scripting. So when you've created something like this, let's shrink the scripter away, and you can see I've got a bug. This stayed shrunk, and the reason it stayed shrunk is I did a screen save while I have my scripter open, and that's a bug which will be fixed. Luckily for me, I have a tool called Fill Screen, which will fill out my screen and bring it up to a size that's appropriate, because we're building a panel anyway. Let's set, for the heck of it, let's go to our edit mode, and let's set a bitmap. I think I have one in my screens folder. Yeah, there's a piece of brass. Now, there's 2 modes for bitmaps. You can see I got panel mode selected. If I don't select panel mode, my bitmap takes up the entire area. That may be fine for what you want, and there are times that you're going to want that bitmap because you've got drawings on it pointing to buttons or something to be a panel mode. You'll set it to panel mode, and it'll just fill the button. So let's save this, and I'm going to select Save As Panel because I'm not sure I've done a save on this particular edit. And we called that calcpanel.panel, and we save it, and it's gone. So I'm going to go back to Pokey's Motion just by selecting Pokey's Motion. And everything reloads, and we're back into a system, but we're in edit mode, so we should turn off edit mode. Yeah. And now right away I can jog and move around and so on. But we want to be able to use that diagnostics panel. So let's do that. Let's turn on edit mode again. And when we click on the zoom panel, it no longer zooms. Now we can do a properties on it. And in the properties for a panel, you will see that we have pane configuration, and it says 1, and that means there's 1 screen in it. But if you click into it, there's an ellipse, that triple dot that appears. Click it, and you'll come up with a panel designer. This lists all the panels that you have written. You only have 1. I have a lot that I play with. Here's the calculator panel that we made, and I'm going to shift it over. Now you can move them up and down and for their order, how they will appear on the tabs, and you can also give them names. Since there was only 1, I didn't bother name it. So let's call that diags, and we'll call the second one calculator. And I tried to keep the name short so they'll fit in the panels better. So then we say OK, do that, turn off the edit mode, and you would save this panel if you want that to stay. You have to click in G-code and toolpath to clear them once you're back in and on that. So now when we zoom out on our diagnostics panel, you notice we have a calculator panel, and there's our calculator. And if we started off at 0, because it's one shitty calculator, 12 times 3 equals 36. And that's how you build screens, panels, and edits inside Augie. Clicking display will zoom it away. Now, because it has more than one page, the background bitmap of the two competing pages will at random times slide off the screen, and the previous page's bitmap will slide in. That's just a system graphic that goes on in the background. So there it goes there. You can see it slide away. So that's the intro on how to do screen design. I'm sorry it's such a long video. Most of the following ones will be short vignettes encompassing single controls and the various things you can do with them. The scripting is quite powerful, and there's quite a bit that you can add with the scripting, but all I've shown you so far is a little bit of the scripting and only how it relates to the screens. That has absolutely nothing to do, other than the language, with how we're going to progress with scripts inside the G code. Okay, enjoy. Merry Christmas.